I read TikTok's most popular fantasy books so that you don't have to. Grab a drink and let's get talking. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about fantasy books and specifically the most popular fantasy books on TikTok. We're just in the book community in general, and how I feel about all of them. So if you're new to my channel, welcome. I am a fantasy reader. Fantasy is actually the genre that got me into reading. So I really do love fantasy. I love enemies to lovers. I love all the typical fantasy tropes. And so I have read a lot, and I mean a lot, of the like really popular and trendy fantasy books that are out right now. And a little spoiler alert is that I really do love most of them. And so instead of telling you which ones I hated and recommend not reading, I'm just going to give you guys a very brief like what this book is kind of about, or even just the vibes of the book, and let you determine if you think you would like this book or not. Because I know that I would appreciate that type of video. So here it is. And we are going to start with one of the most like you guys, you're not going to be surprised. All right, here she is. The queen herself, the book that started it all for a lot of us. That is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Now, do I think you should read this book? I think my answer is going to be obvious here. Yes, I do. But do I think this book is for everyone? Not particularly. And so let me just give you a very brief, if you're new to the world of fantasy. And if you're not, stick around because we're going to get into some good ones. So this book it takes place, this young teen girl, I think she is either 16 or 18 in this first book, and I want to say that she's 18. She is basically hunting to provide food for her family. So she's out in the woods every single day trying to get a really large animal so that they can eat off of the meat that the animal provides, and so that she can sell the pelts for coin and all of that to be able to support her family, because her mom has passed away and her dad is very, very injured. And then she has two sisters that she is basically providing for. Now, let me just say, she's the youngest of the two sisters. So truthfully, none of this responsibility should be on her, but her sisters are selfish. So it is. So that is like where this book starts off, and basically what gets her into the fantasy realm, because none of that sounds too fantasy-ish yet. But she kills a wolf, which ends up being a fae creature, and the High Lord of the Spring Court ends up coming to her home, busting down the door and saying, "You are going to come to Prithian with me to my court, because as like an homage to you killing one of my men." And so that's kind of where it all gets kicked off. That all happens in like the very first chapter of this book. And from there we go on a journey of Feyre going into Prithian, which she's always been told is a very, very dangerous place. And she's scared. She doesn't know who to trust. She doesn't know if she can trust this High Lord. She doesn't know if she can trust his people. And it just gets better and better as the book goes on. But let me tell you that Sarah J. Maas wrote this book. She was quite young. And it definitely reads like a YA book. A typical YA book, I will say. So this book itself is not my favorite book in the series, and it's not the book that I am constantly telling people you have to read. I mean, obviously you have to read it because you have to read the rest of the series, but Like book 2 and 3 is where it all gets really, really good. And where I say you have to read this series to get to at least book 2. If you don't like it after book 2, then maybe it's just not for you, and that's really okay. But oh my goodness, it gets so good. And I would just say definitely, definitely, if you have read the first book and you're like, I hated that, I don't understand the hype, maybe consider giving book 2 a chance, because I really do think that the series takes a turn after book 2. It becomes very different from that point on. And book 3 is quite plot heavy. So if you thought that maybe there wasn't enough plot or action in this first book, trust me, you'll get there. There is a lot as you go on, but this is just a stepping stone to get to the most amazing books in the series. So moving on to the next book that is talked about almost just as much as that book, and that is Throne of Glass. Now, Throne of Glass is a lot different than ACOTAR, and I'll tell you why. This book is very, very plot heavy. This book focuses very little on romance, and it focuses a whole lot on a really, really huge plot. Now, when I say that, a lot of people expect to pick up Throne of Glass and they're jumped into a war between kingdoms, and it's not quite that simple. Throne of Glass takes place with our main character, Celaena Sardothien. Oh my gosh, why can't I talk? Celaena Sardothien. We love our girl Sally. We love her. She is great. She's the best. And basically, she is a prisoner coming from Endovir, the salt mines of Endovir, which is one of the worst and highest guarded prison camps in this whole universe. And she is this 16-year-old girl coming from the salt mines of Endovir because she is the most wanted assassin in the whole world in this series. And that is because, obviously she's an assassin, so she's wanted. But the reason she's coming from Endovir and going to the kingdom is because the king wants her to partake in this championship where he will find the best assassin to be his personal assassin. So she's going to compete in this really crazy life or death championship to become the king's assassin. Now that is just literally the most minor description of this single book that I can give. But the series is an 8-book series. So let's just say it goes so much deeper than that. That is just the stepping stone to getting to the big stuff. So, there is a really crazy debate on what order this series should be read in, and that is a whole video of its own. So I'm not going to go into that into this video, but if you would be interested in hearing my thoughts on that, I would love to make a full video on just Sarah J. Maas reading orders in general, and specifically the Throne of Glass series and the different reading orders and what the best one is. I would love to make a separate video about that specifically. So if you would like that, let me know in the comments down below, because I will make that video if enough people want it. So do I think you should read this book? I would say yes. But especially, again, Sarah J. Maas wrote this book when she was 16 years old. It didn't get published until years later. But this series started when she was very, very young. So does this read like a 16-year-old's fantasy book? Yes, it definitely does. Does it read like a good 16-year-old fantasy book? Yes. But just trust me when I say, if you don't love where this first book is going, hold on tight and just keep reading, because oh my goodness, this is actually my favorite fantasy series I've ever read in my entire life, even over ACOTAR. Yes, I said it, even over ACOTAR. I would say I loved ACOTAR. It got me into Sarah J. Maas books. It got me into high fantasy and books like that. It literally altered my brain chemistry when I read ACOTAR for the first time. I was like, I've never read something this good in my life. Now, mind you, I was like 19 years old when I read it, so I was young. I was the perfect age range to be reading ACOTAR. But seriously, it really did change me as a reader. But it was a stepping stone to get to something so much better. And that is Throne of Glass. So if you have the will to read a huge 8-book series where like the last book is literally over 1,000 pages, please, what are you doing? What are you waiting for? I'm begging you right now to pick up Throne of Glass and get reading, because you won't regret it, especially like getting to bookish 3/4. Really 3 is where it picks up like crazy, and you will start to really see like where the series transforms into what the whole rest of the series is going to be. But it's good right from the beginning, and this book right here is very like nostalgic. Like when I'm in a reading slump, most of the time I'm like, I need my girl Sully to get me out of this. So yeah, that's that. Now moving on, the third book that I'm going to talk about is, yes, another Sarah J. Maas book. But I just feel like I have to talk about all 3 of them first and get them out of the way before I talk about the other fantasy books, because they're so talked about on social media. And so I feel like for beginning readers, or even for people who haven't really jumped into fantasy yet, you probably are wondering like, what is all the hype on these books? So next, let's talk about Crescent City. Crescent City is the 3rd series written by Sarah J. Maas, and I want to emphasize the 3rd series written by Sarah J. Maas, because I am begging you to not read this book until you have read the ACOTAR and the Throne of Glass series, both of them. Now, I feel like ACOTAR and Throne of Glass can really be read in whatever order. Like, you can read one over the other first. It doesn't really matter. I always recommend them to be read in the order that she published the series. So ACOTAR, Throne of Glass, then Crescent City. ACOTAR and Throne of Glass, you can swatch. Oh my gosh. You can swap them and read them in. You can read Throne of Glass first. You can read Crescent City or ACOTAR first. But this series specifically, I ask you, if you have not already, please wait and read this after you've read the other 2. Because reason number one, it is so unbelievably different than the other 2 books. And I feel like people they jump into this thinking that it's going to be so much different than it actually is. And I feel like it's the Sarah J. Maas fans who love her writing and her story building are the ones that are here for this crazy world building that she puts up in the first 100 pages of this book. And the people who have never read a Sarah J. Maas book in their life who pick up this book are the ones who are like, what the heck did I just read? And so that's like my biggest it's not the biggest reason, but it's my number 1 reason that I tell people. My biggest reason is something I can't talk about, and that I just ask you to just trust me. Just trust me, okay? Let me just lead you into the world of Sarah J. Maas and just trust me. Pick this up 3rd. Now, let me tell you a little vibe of what this book is like, and then you can decide if it's something that you're even interested in at all. So this is a high fantasy book that takes place in a world that is very, very modern. It is like if our world was this like high technology, like high fantasy world where there are still laptops, there are still iPhones, there are clubs, it is really, really different than anything I've ever read. And I loved it for that. I loved that. Like, if you read ACOTAR and Throne of Glass and you're like, it was good, but it's like every other fantasy book I've ever read, welcome to Crescent City, because you will not be saying that when you pick up Crescent City. This is very different. Very different to the point where a lot of people don't like it because it's so different than anything else she's ever read. And it's honestly different than, or written is what I meant, and it's different than anything else I've ever read. And so I love Crescent City. I love the series very much. I love Bryce. She's our main character. She is wild and very, it's so hard to even describe. She's very confident. She's like this curvy, beautiful redhead that just doesn't take no from anyone and just does whatever the heck she wants to do. And she's basically solving a murder mystery in this book. And it's really, really fun. And I love it. So after you've read A Court of Thorns and Roses and Throne of Glass, jump into Crescent City. Because I don't think, knowing a little brief like what it's like, I don't think you'll be disappointed. That's all I'm going to say. Now that we've talked about Sarah J. Maas for 17 minutes, let's jump into all of my other recommendations for fantasy books that are really, really, really popular on TikTok. Let's jump into another young adult that I don't see on any of these platforms nearly enough, and that is An Ember in the Ashes. Guys, what are we doing? What are we doing sleeping on this series? It is not okay. I'm literally, like, it makes me a little bit angry that I didn't see this series, or I didn't pick up the series until I was 23 years old. What? What am I doing? What was I waiting for? I wish I would have read this series when I was like 16 years old, because this would have become my entire life and my entire personality. I would have been obsessed with this series. So what I did was I convinced my 18-year-old brother to pick up the series and read the whole thing, and he was obsessed. And I got to live vicariously through him getting to read this book in the age range that I feel like it was meant to be read in. This book is following our main character, Laya. This is a high fantasy book. Basically, her parents were killed, and her brother is taken by this, I don't even know how to describe it, but basically by an empire is what I'm going to say, and taken to a prison. And she wants to figure out what in the world it was that her parents and her brother knew that got them killed and taken and put in prison. And so she goes into the empire as a slave, working as a slave, to try to learn answers while working for the rebellion. That's all I need to say about this book. This is a series. This is a 4-book series. They're all right here, and they are beautiful. Yes, the spines line up and make a picture. These are the recent prints. There are like 3 different covers of the series. So it originally got printed. Book 1 and 2 had its like original covers. And then what happened is when book 3 and 4 came out, they switched the covers to be a cover with people on the cover. It had like Laya and our main character Elias on the cover, and basically they printed the whole series with that cover, so all 4 books. And then just recently they re-released these paperbacks with these covers, and I'm so obsessed that I gave my brothers my original paperbacks, and I rebought these as I was reading them, because I like, let's just take a moment to just appreciate this. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say about this book. 100% I do recommend this book. So, and this is like one of the only ones that I feel like I don't see talked about enough, and so that's why I'm squeezing this in here. Next, moving on to ones that I see talked about all the time. let's move on to my second book on this list that I don't see talked about enough, but I do see it on here a little bit. TikTok convinced me to read When the Moon Hatched. But I don't see enough people talking about how they felt about this book. I just always see this book on social media, but I never see people talking about like how much they liked it, if they liked it, if they didn't like it. So I read it so that you don't have to read this humongous chunky thing if you don't think this is going to be for you. So this book is where to even start. My goodness, this thing is huge. I feel like I could actually injure somebody if I wasn't careful with this thing. When the Moon Hatched is also, okay, sorry, I keep getting off track. There is legit a glossary, guys. There's a glossary. There's a map and there's a glossary. This book, oh, there's also a pronunciation guide. This book is a really, really fun, high fantasy, dragon-filled story that often they talk about the gods who like came before them. There are a bunch of gods that they define and they tell you about in the glossary. And like in the intro of the book, the very first chapter of the book is like kind of a world building chapter where it basically tells you the world began with 5, and it like just starts this book describing how their world began and how dragons hatched from moons, basically. And so this is a very, very, very unique fantasy book. I've actually, again, never read a fantasy book quite like this. If you guys have, let me know, because I would actually love to read more books like this. And yeah, I feel like I don't really have much to say about this. I did really like our female main character. She was a very strong, independent woman. She, again, does not take no for an answer. She's very headstrong, very, I feel like that's like a good enough description of her that you guys you'll know whether you want to pick this up or not. Don't be intimidated by the size. It really went a lot faster than I thought it was going to, because these paperbacks had me scared to read this. It's really only like 600 and something pages, which is comparable to a lot of these other books that I am talking about. I think it's just a formatting thing that makes it this huge. So that's all I'm going to say about this book. But yeah, I would definitely recommend this. I thought it was really good. So yeah, moving on. Now, I want to talk about one that I've been seeing a lot of hate for this book lately, and I want to talk about it. And that is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. So I picked this up because of TikTok. This book blew up when it first was released because Lauren Roberts herself started on TikTok and basically wrote this whole book with an audience of TikTok. And so when it finally came out, everybody was talking about it. And I was so excited to get my hands on it. And I really enjoyed it. But let me tell you why I think so many people are hating on this book and let you decide if you're going to read it or not. This book is the most typical, overdone story of the enemies to lovers. Girl has magical powers and nobody knows about it. She's being, like, she could be killed if they found out that she had magical powers. Wait. No. Why did I just lie? No. Okay, so this is the most typical, overdone young adult fantasy book, like tropes, that I have ever read. But is it still enjoyable? Yes, 100%. This is the typical slow burn, enemies to lovers. It's a trial like book where she's like thrown into the king's trials. this like yearly championship. It's like the hardest thing she's ever gonna do. How's she gonna survive? There's no way she could survive this like really hard trial. And we don't know how that's gonna turn out because there's 3 books in the series. So, but did I think this book is really enjoyable? Yes, I actually really loved the nostalgia that I felt while reading this book. It felt like jumping back into all of the fantasy books that got me into reading. I absolutely loved it, and I really do highly recommend reading this book. Guys, my coffee today, so good. Okay, so next, let's talk about a few more. So I just have to talk about this next one because this was one of my first books that I read, one of my first fantasy books that got me into adult fantasy. And that is The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. Can we also just take a moment to look at how beautiful this cover is? Now, let's talk about this book. This is one of my favorite fantasy books that I've ever read, and let me tell you why. I love that this is a standalone fantasy book, so this is it. It's not going to have a second book. It's not going to have a third book. It's never going to be a series. It is just this book, and that is it. And I love that so much because I sometimes I love a good Throne of Glass size series where we're talking 8 books in the series and they're like 1,000 pages long, and you just know that there's just so much content to read and to love. But those books are also exhausting in their own way, and I feel like we definitely don't have enough standalone fantasy books. I honestly can't really name many more, like, that are just a single book. I have read some, but not many. Most books are at least a duology, and so they have a second book. But not this one. This one is a single standalone book, and the vibe of this book is very, if you ever watch the movie, why can I not think of the movie name? My brain is only saying The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. The Age of Adeline. If you ever read or watched the movie The Age of Adeline, I feel like if you loved that movie, you would really love this book. It is very similar. And I don't even think that they have like the same name on purpose, but they really do. I mean, Addie and Adeline, what are the odds of that? But it's basically a story where this young girl is about to be married off to a man that she does not want to marry. This is a arranged marriage from her family. This book, the very beginning, takes place back in like the 1800s. And her grandma has told her for years and years never to pray to the gods who answer after dark. And what does Addie do? She runs to a wishing well to try to escape her parents in this horrible marriage. And she prays to the gods who answer after dark. And she makes a deal with the devil. And she makes a deal that nobody will remember her, but she will live, and that she will live forever and ever and ever. Basically, what she wanted was she wanted her family to not remember her so that she didn't have to go through with this wedding. And so she makes a deal that nobody will ever remember her and that she will live forever until, so the devil's name is Luke. I think. I haven't read this book in so long. I think his name is Luke. And basically, he's going to check up on her every year on the anniversary of her making this deal. And she can only like die or move on when she surrenders her soul to the devil. This book is a very like slow read, so it like the plot builds over a lot of time. Even though it doesn't look that long, it does kind of feel long. It feels like it drags on just a little bit, but it's so worth it. It is so worth it when you get to the end of this book. Like, this book actually had me sobbing. And that, I feel like I actually don't cry that hard to a lot of books, but this one definitely had me sobbing, like absolutely sobbing in the end. I was a little bit happy, a little bit sad, a little bit everything. Like, I was feeling all of the emotions, and I just highly, highly recommend. So please pick up The Invisible Life of Addie Larue. I feel like you don't have to love fantasy to really like this book. You could love general fiction and still like pick this up and probably love it. So that's all I'm gonna say on this, but definitely pick it up. It's really worth it. Next, the next book is actually one of my most recent fantasy reads and my most recent 5-star fantasy read, and that is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. I really, really enjoyed this book. I liked it a lot. This book is about our main character, which, why is her name escaping me? Oh, Rune. Duh. Rune is a witch in a world where witches are outlawed and you can be killed on the spot just for being a witch. And so Rune is this very infamous witch that is saving other witches, and she goes by the name the Crimson Moth. The only thing is, the witch hunters don't know who the Crimson Moth is. So they are frantically and desperately searching for this witch saver. And it just goes from there. So our main female character is Rune, and our main male character is Gideon, and he is the #1 witch hunter. So yes, this is a enemies to lovers, slow burn. This is just a duology, so there's book 1 and then book 2 is Rebel Witch. I did read both of them, and this was a 5-star fantasy series for me. I loved both. Can I just say how much I love duologies? I love duologies. I love them so much. I feel like you cannot go wrong with a fantasy duology. It's the perfect length. Like, it's not too short because it's one book, but it's not too long because more than 2 books can really just stretch a series out way too long. I love a duology. I just learned this about myself in the last couple years, how much I actually really, really love them. Like, when I find out that a book is going to be a duology, I'm literally 10 times more likely to go pick that book up than if I think that it's going to be a huge, long series. I don't know why, but I love them. I love a duology. And so I really, really loved this. I don't have much else to say because I don't want to give anything else away about the book at all. So that's all you need to know. If that sounds good to you, please go pick this up. And I don't really know anybody who's actually read this book, so I really need some buddies to talk to about this book. So if you have read this, please comment, because I want to talk. I want to talk about this book. I loved it so much. I want to find friends who have read this. Next, we are working our way down. I only have 2 left, and the next one I'm going to talk about is another duology. So you guys know I just went on a tangent about how much I love duologies. Divine Rivals. Guys, this has been out for long enough. Please, if you have not read this, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? This is a time period, this is a wartime fantasy book, so it gives a historical fiction vibe. So good. This is a wartime fantasy book about a girl who has a magical typewriter, and she goes to the front line of the war to journal about the war and to try to find her brother who was in the war, who has not responded to any of her letters in a very long time. And while all of that is happening, the magical element is that her typewriter is magically writing to somebody, and she doesn't know who it is, but she's magically receiving their letters back. So just please go pick this up. This is so good. I flew through this book so fast that I was devastated when I finished the second book because I knew that I will never get to like read this series for the first time again. I loved it. I loved it so much that when my sister, who does not read fantasy, asked me for a fantasy book rec, this was what I told her to read. Guys, she loved it. She loved it. I could even bring her on this channel to tell you how much she loved it. So please, just take my word for it and just pick this up. It's not even that long either. It's a fairly quick fantasy book. Let's see how many. 349 pages. That's nothing. You could read this in an evening. Pick up Divine Rivals, please. Ruthless Vows is also so good. This was another 5-star fantasy duology for me. I loved it. Now, last but not least, and I know I'm feeling like there's an elephant in the room because there's a series that I'm not talking about, and it's not going to be this one. So what I want to talk about is Spark of the Everflame. Now, the elephant in the room is that I have not talked about a very popular series. These right here. If you can't see what this is, I'm pointing to the fourth wing. These are fantasy books that I do recommend. Unfortunately, that don't make it to the list. I could actually also have a whole video on how I feel about the Empyrean series so far. Like from book 1 through 3, what we have so far. I have read all 3 of them. I don't hate them by any means, but I do have lots and lots of thoughts on that series. And so I could do a whole video just on my thoughts on the Empyrean series. But unfortunately, those books are not going to make it into this list. So, my last book, Spark of the Everflame by Penn. I feel like this series, I found gold with this series because I found this series and picked it up when when the second book had just released. So for many of you who don't know this series at all, this series was a independently published series on Amazon. They were on Kindle Unlimited for a long time, and they just recently, in the last like 6 months, got picked up and published by a like actual publishing house, which I can't remember. What is the publishing house that published these? Oh, Atria Books, Simon Schuster. Cool. Yeah, I actually did not know that, but Atria Books, Simon & Schuster ended up, oh my gosh, guys. We're going to pretend that I didn't look at the spine right before I went digging through the pages to find the publishing house. Anyways, I'm not stupid. Just a little slow. So, Spark of the Everflame. I picked this book up. I found this book on my Kindle through Kindle Unlimited, literally like over maybe a year ago. I can't remember when each of them originally published on Kindle Unlimited, but they were all within months of each other. So she had been writing these books for a long time, and by the time she actually self-published each of them, she was on to writing like book 3 and book 4. So this series currently is a 3-book series, but book 4 is coming out, and she has said that she's really hoping book 4 gets released in 2025. Praise the Lord, because I've been waiting for book 4 for a year. I picked up Spark of the Everflame, read it on my Kindle, read it so quickly that I immediately jumped into book 2. I flew through book 2, and luckily, by the time I had finished book 2, book 3 was being released in like a month or 2 on Kindle Unlimited as well. They were all on Kindle Unlimited, which they might still be. I'm not sure, but I just know that they started on there. So you might have to look. But I loved them so much that then I flew through book 3 and I was dying for book 4, which book 4 was set to release in like June or July of 2024. And it got pushed back. It got pushed back like a month or two. And then I was still on like I actually have been approved for the arc of book 4 since like the 3rd book came out. And it got pushed back and then pushed back. And then there was no date set. And then it got removed from like Goodreads. And then it got pulled from like all these things. And then the newsletters came out that it was not going to be published in 2024. Devastating. Very, very sad. But the good news is it's not getting published because there's like a few reasons that Penn has talked about, but all of her books got picked up by a publishing house. And so that changes how things get published. That changes a lot of things that has to do with her releasing her 4th book. She probably has lots of new like things that change about her publishing like process now that she's published by a big publishing house. But all that to say, this is a really good series and I highly, highly recommend it. The main character's name in this is Diem. She's our female main character. It is technically a love triangle between Diem, Henry, and Luther. Henry is part of the resistance and Luther is he is the prince of the kingdom that she is fighting in the resistance against. So, you know, there's enemies to lovers, little love triangle, very, very slow burn. There are really, really, really fun magical creatures in this book that I really liked. They're not dragons, but they're like these really cool creatures that fly. I don't even really know how to describe them, but there's some pretty cool art out there for them. Also, not that long ago, I got something in the mail from Simon & Schuster, and it was this art print of Luther and a bookmark for Heat of the Everflame's new release, the 2nd release for the hardcover copy of it. And I thought that was so sweet because I don't think I signed up to get that, but they just sent it to me, which was really, really fun. When I got this in the mail, I was so excited and touched that they sent that to me. So I loved that. So thank you, Simon & Schuster. You guys have sent me quite a few packages lately, and I'm very, very happy about it. I love it. So, yes, this is my last book on this list of books that I recommend because this is getting way too long. And that's all that I'm going to say about this. I hope you guys do pick up a lot of these books. These books are literally my top fantasy books, and all of them are very, very popular. So if you have wondered about any of these books and if you should pick these up, I hope that this video convinced you that you should. And if any of these are your favorite fantasy books, I want to hear which ones are your favorite. So please let me know down below which ones are your favorite video. What am I talking about? Which ones are your favorite books? And yeah, I hope to see you guys in the next video and have a great day. Bye.